Hello and welcome to FunBikes TV. My name's James and today we're going to be building up a 500 watt MXR electric dirt bike. The first thing we're going to do is to fit the handlebars to the handlebar clamps. To do this, remove the packaging off the handlebars. You'll see on the main section of handlebars at the bottom there are some grooves cut into them. These are to help you to align the bar centrally on the bike. You'll find in the bag of bolts that came with the vehicle, you have two handlebar clamps, tops, two shorter bolts and two longer bolts. These are for attaching the handlebars. To start with, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of your threads. Using stud lock on the end of the threads helps to stop the bolt vibrating loose during use. However, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do a nut and bolt check on the vehicle before or after every use. Take the handlebars and place them into the clamps. When you fit the handlebars, make sure they're in line with the forks. Using the shorter bolts at the front, place them into the clamps. Then take the key barrel and place it over the rear clamps, and using your longer bolts, place these through. One way to tell that the bars are at the correct angle is to make sure the gap is equal between the front and the rear bolts on the bar where your bar pad will fit over. We've now fitted the handlebars to the vehicle and we're ready to check that the yokes are tight on the bike. Using a 5 Allen key, check that the yokes are tight on the bike. Do this on both sides. We're now ready to fit the front number board and mudguard. We're now going to fit the front mudguard and number board to the bike. To start with, remove the bolts on the top yoke and the 3 bolts on the bottom yoke using a 5 Allen key. You'll find that the bolts are slightly different lengths on these. The one that goes in the front just here is shorter than the 2 that come up underneath. Remove the protective cover from the front number board. To do this, we'll need to remove the front brake cable. Align the locking ring on here with the notch in the adjuster and pull your cable out and out of the actual brake caliper, brake lever itself. Then feed it through the number board and reattach. When you've finished doing this, make sure that these do not all align with each other to make sure there's no chance of the cable coming out. Twist one of them round, like so. Before we fit the front board itself, we're going to attach the front mudguard. Using the shorter bolt that we removed first, place it through the front of the mudguard and place in and tighten. Don't fully tighten this up, leave a little bit of movement in the mudguard so that you can align the other bolts more easily. Attach the bolts back in. Again, just putting them both in loosely to start with to allow you to get everything aligned correctly. And then fully tighten. Once you've tightened these 2 bolts, tighten the one on the top of the mudguard that we attached first. Tighten the Allen key bolt at the front of the front mudguard. Then lift your number board up. You'll see there's 2 holes in the bottom of the number board which align with the 2 tabs coming up on the front mudguard. Slot them onto there. Take the spacer and place it behind the number board with the mounting bolt going through and reattach it to the top yoke. We're now ready to fit the front wheel to the bike. We're now going to fit the front wheel to the bike. First thing to do is to make sure that the 3 disc bolts are tight using a 5 Allen key. At the same time, using a 12 spanner, make sure that the valve locking nut is tight. You can see the actual centre spacer within the wheel has slipped out of position slightly, so put an Allen key or something through before you try and fit the wheel to make sure that it sits in line with the holes in the bearings. It makes it a lot easier to put the wheel into the bike. Taking your front axle, remove the 2 spacers off it. They are both the same size, so it doesn't matter which side of the bike they go into. Place the axle through with 1 spacer on. And take your front wheel, slotting the disc into the caliper at the same time. And place a spacer in on the disc side. Then apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread. And then attach the nut on here and use a 14 and 17 spanner combination to tighten up the front wheel. Making sure that the wheel can spin freely. Do not over tighten this, as it can cause the bearings to fail, and it will also affect the bike's performance. But at the same time, make sure you have no side-to-side play in the actual wheel. While you're here, we're going to tighten up the 3 brake caliper bolts. 2 on the forks and then the 1 for the cable. We're now ready to work our way back through the bike, making sure everything is tight. Okay, we're now going to make sure all the plastic bolts are tight on the bike using a 5 Allen key. Just run over them all, on both sides, making sure that they're nipped up. We're now going to make sure that the foot peg's tight on the bike using a 10 spanner and a 5 Allen key. Do this on both sides of the bike. And apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads once you've done this. We're also going to check that the rear swing arm is tight. For this you will need a 12 and 14 socket or spanner combination. Once this is tight, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads, and we're then going to make sure that the rear stand is tight. Again, using a 14 and 17 spanner socket combination. We're now ready to fit the rear shock absorber to the bike. We're now going to fit the rear shock absorber to the bike. Lift the rear swing arm up and then align the shock absorber with the mount in hole in the swing arm, and using the bolt that came in the nut and bolts pack, insert it through and then attach the nut on the opposite side and tighten with a 10 and 13 spanner or socket combination. Once it is fully tight, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. Now that we've tightened the lower shock bolt, we're going to make sure that the top shock bolt is tight as well, again using a 10 and 13 spanner combination. Once you're happy it is tight, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the threads. We're now going to make sure that the rear brake caliper and brake disc is tight on the bike. Using a 5 Allen key, make sure that the brake caliper is tight, checking the 2 bolts just here and the cable bolt just here. Once you've done this, we're then going to make sure that the brake disc itself is tight, again using a 5 Allen key. Once you've checked these, we're going to use a 12 spanner to make sure that the valve lock is tight on the bike. And then we're going to check that the rear axle is tight using a 14 and 17 spanner combination. Once you've done this, apply a small quantity of stud lock to the end of the thread. We now need to level off the levers and fit the bar pad to the vehicle before connecting the battery for the first time. We're now going to adjust the levers to a comfortable riding position. The optimum riding position for when you're riding the bike is to have the levers angled down at approximately 30 degrees. So if you get a 5 Allen key underneath the levers, there is a bolt just there to loosen them off. Angle one side down and then adjust the other side, looking across the bike to get the levers level. Once we've tightened the levers, we're now ready to fit the bar pad. If you remove the cover from the bar pad, then carefully using a pair of scissors, cut down the centre, and then fit the bar pad onto the bike before replacing the Velcro cover. We've now fully assembled our 500W MXR. The last thing to do is to connect the battery and put it on charge for the first time. Okay, we're now going to connect the battery on our bike. Lift down the cover at the front and insert the kettle style lead into the front of the battery pack. We're now ready to put the bike on charge for the first time. On the left hand side of the bike there's a plastic cover next to your 3-speed key switch. Pull the cover down and insert the charger. You will see there is a notch out of the charger which lines up with a notch in the charge point to make sure the pins align correctly. When you put the bike on charge for the first time, charge it for 10 hours before the first use. You will see there's an LED system on the charger which will light up just here when it's plugged into the mains. When the charger is green, it means it's fully charged. When it is red on the LED, it shows that it is charging. For the first 10-hour charge, leave the bike on charge even if it turns to green. This will boost up your battery pack, give you longer life out of your battery and also give you more ride time per ride. However, once you've done this initial 10-hour charge, after that always disconnect your charger once the LED has turned to green. Always charge the bike with the key turned off. We've now fully built our 500W electric MXR. Thank you for watching FunBikes TV. Let the fun begin.